I was packing to leave, but when my landlady whispered, "Don't go tonight, stay with me instead," everything changed. I started packing late that night, thinking I'd finish before morning. The room felt smaller than usual, half-empty boxes scattered across the floor, the faint hum of the ceiling fan stirring the still air. The walls that had once carried laughter and late-night thoughts now echoed only the dull sound of folded cardboard. I kept telling myself it was just another move, just another chapter. But as I sealed the first box, something inside me felt strangely heavy, like I was closing more than a door. I didn't hear her footsteps until she spoke. "Leaving already?" It was Clara, my landlady, or rather, the woman who had become quietly woven into my months here. She stood at the doorway, her hand resting against the frame. The hallway light outlined her silhouette, soft, calm, familiar. She wasn't dressed for visitors, just a loose cardigan over a cream blouse, her hair tied in a low bun. But there was a grace in the simplicity, an ease that made the air between us shift. "I didn't mean to wake you," I said quickly, but she smiled faintly. "You didn't. I saw your light." She stepped inside, her eyes moving over the boxes, then back to me. "You're really going," she murmured, almost to herself. "It's going to be quiet without you." There was warmth in her voice, the kind that lingers, even after the words fade. I tried to laugh it off, saying I'd only been a tenant, but the way she looked at me, steady, thoughtful, made that sound untrue. She offered to help, insisting it would be faster with two. I wanted to refuse, but her tone left no space for argument. We began folding shirts and stacking books, our movements careful, almost synchronized. Every so often our hands brushed, lightly, accidentally, and each time, I felt that same flicker of hesitation in her pause. The silence grew softer, not awkward but weighted, filled with everything neither of us said. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping gently against the windows. She looked toward the sound and smiled. "It always rains when someone leaves," she whispered. I watched her for a moment, the way the lamplight touched her profile, the calm steadiness in her eyes, and for the first time that night, I wasn't sure if leaving was what I wanted. When she turned back to me, her expression had changed, not sad, just quietly knowing. She reached for another box, her fingers brushing mine again, deliberate this time. And in that small, wordless moment, something fragile began, the kind of feeling you don't pack away easily. After she helped me pack for a while, Clara glanced toward the window where rain traced silver lines down the glass. "You shouldn't finish tonight," she said softly. "Come downstairs. I'll make us some tea." I hesitated, half thinking I should stay focused, but something about her voice, low, steady, impossible to refuse, drew me after her. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender polish and rain-damp wood. When we reached the kitchen, she switched on a small lamp over the counter. Its amber light filled the room like a memory. The kettle began to hum, a gentle, comforting sound. Clara moved with quiet precision, spooning loose tea leaves, setting out two mismatched cups, brushing a curl of steam from her face. I watched from the table, realizing how easily she seemed to fit into silence, how she never rushed it away. When she finally sat opposite me, she wrapped both hands around her mug and said, "So, what's pulling you out of here?" I tried to find a clean answer, said something about new opportunities, cheaper rent, a change of scenery. But the words felt thin. I sighed and admitted, "Maybe I'm just running. I don't even know from what." She nodded, eyes fixed on the swirling tea. "I know that feeling," she murmured. "You tell yourself you're moving forward, but really you're just trying not to stand still." Her honesty disarmed me. The rhythm of the rain deepened, tapping against the window like a heartbeat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It wasn't awkward, it was necessary, as if the quiet itself was helping us breathe. Then she said, almost to herself, "It gets lonely here sometimes." Her smile faltered, revealing something delicate underneath, the solitude of a house once full of life. She mentioned her daughter, grown and gone, the late nights when the clock was the only sound. Without thinking, I said, "You've kept this place alive, though." She looked up, surprised, then softened. "That's kind of you." Her fingers brushed the sugar bowl toward me. When our hands touched, it was brief but steady, the warmth of her skin grounding me more than I expected. Steam curled between us, blurring the edges of everything but her eyes. In them I saw the same quiet ache I felt, two people caught between moving on and holding still. Somewhere in that silence, the space between tenant and landlady began to fade, replaced by something simpler, truer, two souls sharing tea on a rainy night, finding comfort in being seen. The tea had gone cold by the time either of us noticed. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist, brushing lightly against the kitchen windows. Clara leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting toward the living room. "You know," she said after a pause, "this house used to be so full of noise. My husband, my daughter, her friends, someone was always running up or down those stairs." Her smile flickered, half wistful, half resigned. "Now it's just me and the echo." Before I could respond, she stood and crossed to a wooden cabinet near the fireplace. From the bottom shelf, she pulled out a thick, worn photo album, the leather cover creased at the corners, the edges softened by time. She brought it to the table, placing it between us like something fragile and alive. "I haven't looked through this in a while," she murmured, running her hand over the cover before opening it. The pages whispered as they turned, releasing the faint smell of old paper and ink. The first photo showed a younger version of her, laughing beside a man who looked kind, proud. "That's Daniel," she said quietly. "He built most of the shelves here. He used to say wood carried memory." She smiled faintly, then glanced at me. "He's been gone 6 years." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say much, just nodded, listening. She seemed grateful for that. There were pictures of her daughter's birthdays, family picnics, Christmas mornings. In each one, Clara's smile carried the same light I saw now, only gentler with time. When she reached a photo of herself on the porch, sunlight in her hair, paint smudged on her cheek, she laughed softly. "I look ridiculous." "You look happy," I said before I could stop myself. She met my eyes then, really looked, as if trying to decide whether to deflect or accept the truth in what I'd said. "Maybe I was," she replied, her voice quieter now. "It's strange seeing yourself through someone else's eyes." As she turned another page, our shoulders brushed. She didn't move away. The faint scent of her perfume, something floral and warm, filled the space between us. We sat there for a while, the rain outside turning into a steady rhythm. And in the glow of the kitchen lamp, surrounded by old photographs and fading laughter, I realized something had shifted, subtly, irrevocably. She wasn't just my landlady anymore. She was someone whose silence I wanted to understand. We were still sitting at the table when the lights flickered once, then went out completely. The sudden darkness swallowed the room, leaving only the soft patter of rain and the fading echo of our breath. "Oh, not again," Clara sighed in the dark, her voice half laugh, half exasperation. "Old house, old wiring." I heard her move away from the table, the rustle of her cardigan, the soft creak of floorboards, then the faint click of a drawer opening. A moment later, a flame bloomed in the air, warm and trembling. She'd found a candle and struck a match. The small glow painted the kitchen in gold and shadow. It flickered against the edges of her face, her eyes reflecting the light, her expression softer than I'd ever seen. "There," she said, setting the candle in the middle of the table. "Better than the dark, at least." We both laughed, but it didn't chase away the stillness that followed. If anything, the light made it deeper. I could see her clearly now, the way her hair had loosened from its bun, a few strands catching the candlelight like copper threads. She leaned her chin into her hand, studying me quietly. "You're very calm," she said. "Most people get restless in the dark." "Maybe I like it," I said. "It makes everything slower." She smiled at that, a small, knowing curve of her lips. "You're different, you know." The words hung there, heavy but gentle. I felt the air shift between us, that quiet moment when something unnamed starts to take form. She reached out absently to steady the candle, and her fingers brushed mine. Neither of us moved away. The warmth was slight, but it spread fast, a quiet current of awareness that neither dared acknowledge. "I should check the fuse box," I said, though my voice came out softer than I meant. "You can, after your tea," she replied, her tone equally low. "For now, just sit." So I did. For a long while, we sat across from each other, our faces lit only by the thin, trembling light. Outside, the rain had stopped, even the world seemed to hold its breath. She broke the silence first, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For listening. For not treating me like I'm invisible." The words hit deeper than I expected. I wanted to say something, anything, but the truth sat wordless in my chest. The lights came back a few minutes later, but something else had already switched on between us, quiet and undeniable. The lights had been back on for nearly half an hour, but the moment between us hadn't really shifted. The candles still flickered on the counter, their small flames refusing to die out, as if they knew the night wasn't done speaking yet. Clara stood and began to tidy up, though there was nothing left to clean. I watched her move, calm, deliberate, as she wiped the already dry counter with a folded cloth, her shoulders just a little too tense. I could tell she was searching for something to do with her hands, the way people do when they're trying not to say what's really on their mind. "I should probably finish packing," I said, my voice sounding distant, as if it belonged to someone else. She froze for a moment, then turned. "You still plan to leave tonight?" I nodded, though even as I did, the word felt heavier than I meant it to. "The moving truck comes early. I figured I'd get a head start." She looked at me for a long second, long enough for the space between us to hum with something almost fragile. "It's late," she said finally. "Too late to be alone with boxes and memories." Her words caught me off guard, gentle, but edged with something vulnerable. She took a step closer, the light catching in her eyes. "You don't have to go tonight." I blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. "What?" She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides a tremor. "Stay," she whispered. "Just, for tonight. We'll have breakfast in the morning. Then you can decide what comes next." The silence that followed was deep, alive. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock, the soft hum of the refrigerator. I could feel my pulse in my wrist, and then her fingers touched it, light and careful, as if asking for permission rather than giving it. Her skin was warm against mine. The touch lasted only a heartbeat, but it said everything words couldn't. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet. "Are you sure?" She nodded, eyes steady though her breath shook slightly. "Yes. I just don't want you to leave on a night that feels this unfinished." For a long time, neither of us moved. The house around us seemed to listen, the floorboards, the air, the faint hum of the lamp. And though nothing was promised, nothing defined, I knew something had changed. I wasn't her tenant anymore. Not tonight. The scent of coffee was the first thing I noticed. It drifted up the hallway, warm and earthy, pulling me from sleep before I even opened my eyes. For a moment, I didn't recognize the ceiling above me, the soft cream color, the gentle pattern of light spilling through the curtains. Then I remembered where I was. Clara's house. The night before came back in fragments, her voice, her touch, the way silence had stretched and softened between us. We hadn't spoken much after that. She'd shown me the guest room, said, "It's warmer here," and wished me good night with a small smile that lingered even after she left. Now, morning light poured across the room, golden and soft, catching dust motes in the air like tiny sparks. I rose, still uncertain if I'd overstepped some invisible line, if the quiet comfort of last night had been real or simply kindness. When I stepped into the kitchen, she was already there. Her back was to me, her hair tied loosely, the sleeves of her cardigan rolled up. Sunlight streamed across the counter, and for a brief moment, she looked almost unreal, like a memory I hadn't lived yet. She turned at the sound of my footsteps, smiling in that quiet, familiar way. "Morning," she said, her voice still husky with sleep. "I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, so I made it both ways." I smiled back, suddenly aware of how natural this felt, the domestic warmth, the easy rhythm of her movements. "Both ways sounds perfect," I said. We sat at the small table by the window, 2 mugs between us, a plate of toast cooling in the center. The conversation started light, the rain last night, the neighborhood, her garden that hadn't seen sunlight in a week. But beneath every small word, there was something else, a new awareness, fragile but steady. At one point, she reached across to pass the butter, and our fingers met, brief, deliberate, without apology this time. Her hand was warm. Mine didn't move. For a second, the world felt still again, like it had the night before. The difference was, neither of us looked away. Clara smiled softly, her thumb brushing a crumb from the table. "You look more rested," she said. "I think your house has something to do with that," I replied. She didn't answer, just met my eyes with quiet understanding. The kind that says everything without saying a word. And as sunlight spread across the table between us, I realized I wasn't thinking about leaving anymore. I was thinking about how it felt to stay. By afternoon, the house had settled into that familiar calm again, the kind that feels alive but unhurried. Outside, the clouds were breaking apart, spilling bands of sunlight across the porch and the garden beyond. I stood by the living room window, half dressed for leaving, my suitcase still waiting by the door. It looked wrong there, like it belonged to a different life. Clara entered quietly, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She paused when she saw the packed bag. "So," she said gently, "is that goodbye?" I turned toward her. She looked composed, but her eyes, those steady, watchful eyes, gave her away. They held the same unspoken question I'd been asking myself since morning. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe it was supposed to be. But now it just feels unfinished." She smiled faintly, walking closer until she stood just a few feet away. The afternoon light traced the lines of her face, soft and golden. "You don't owe me an explanation," she said. "I just didn't want you to leave thinking this place was only walls and rent." Her words landed softly but deeply. For the first time, I saw her not as the woman who owned the house, but as someone who'd built it around her heart, who had filled it with echoes waiting for warmth to return. "I think," I said slowly, "that's exactly what makes it hard to go." She laughed quietly, not out of amusement, but understanding. "Then don't make any decisions today. Stay. Open the windows. Make too much coffee. Let the boxes wait a little longer." It sounded simple, but the invitation carried weight, a kind of permission I didn't realize I needed. I took a step closer, close enough to see the soft reflection of the garden in her eyes. "Clara," I said, my voice low, "this already feels like home." She looked at me for a long moment, her lips parting slightly, her breath catching just enough for me to notice. Then she reached for my hand, her touch gentle but sure. "Then let it be," she whispered. The clock ticked softly behind us. The sunlight spilled across the floor. And in that quiet, unremarkable afternoon, something lasting took root, not a confession, not a promise, but an understanding, that sometimes, the heart doesn't ask for forever. It just asks for a place to rest, and someone who feels like peace. If this story touched something quiet inside you, take a moment to like this video, and let me know what part stayed with you most. Every comment, every word you share helps me bring more stories like this to life, slow, human, and honest. Subscribe if you want to feel something real again.